If someone had told me 10 years ago that by 36, I wouldn't be dreaming of a new car or a house with a white picket fence, but simply about disappearing somewhere far away, I would have laughed right in their face. But here I am. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 36 years old and I'm a flight attendant for one of the largest airlines in the U.S. I'm based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. And every day, I put on my perfectly pressed uniform, not out of pride or some romantic notion, but to escape my own life for a few precious hours. Waiting for me at home is Mark. My husband. No, not the love of my life. Not anymore. Once we built dreams together, laughed until we cried, planned to travel the world, maybe even open a little coffee shop. But now we live like two strangers sharing bills and square footage. No kids. No warmth. No meaning. Just accusations, cold silences, and arguments that leave me feeling hollow. Mark's jealousy has become absurd. He once accused me of flirting with a gas station cashier who simply smiled as he handed me my change. He picks fights out of nothing. Tracks my every move. Living with him is like walking through a minefield. You never know when you'll set off the next explosion. Work became my lifeline. When I take off into the sky, leaving the cities, highways, and houses below, it feels like I'm shedding the weight of my life. In the air, I'm just Emily again. The woman with a light step down the aisle, a genuine smile for the kids on board, endless patience for every strange request. And yet, even the skies no longer feel light. Each flight feels like a rerun of the same old movie. Seatbelt checks, oxygen mask demonstrations, coffee, water, turbulence, head counts. I started living on autopilot, from bell to bell, from takeoff to landing. Sometimes I catch myself daydreaming, what if I just stayed somewhere? Maybe in a small town by the ocean where I could spend my days sitting on the shore with a book, watching the waves kiss the sand. Where nobody knew my name. Where nobody would come looking for me. I dream about it every single day. Leaving. Disappearing. Giving myself a second chance. But for now I'm still here. On yet another flight. In a uniform I've come to resent. Wearing a smile that's barely holding together. It was just another hot, sticky August day. A packed plane. Exhausted passengers. Minor delays. I stood at the boarding gate, straightening my blazer, smiling into the endless flow of new faces. In my mind, I whispered a simple prayer, let today be easy. No outbursts. No meltdowns. No, I didn't even get to finish the thought before I felt it, that heavy pressure in the air. Something was about to happen. I just knew. When we finally reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt signs blinked off, I did my usual aisle check, breathing in the familiar smell of the plane, coffee, recirculated air, plastic cups. And somewhere along that walk, a painful thought slipped into my mind. Every time we climb into the sky, a piece of me dies a little more. The old me, the one who still believed, fades away. All that's left is the uniform, the smile, and duty. I didn't know it yet, but that flight would change everything. It would be up there, 10,000 meters above a world I no longer recognized, where I'd finally hear it again. The sound of a living heart. My own. The first half hour after takeoff passed quietly. I was standing in the back of the cabin, checking the drinks on my cart, listening to the steady hum of the engines. Passengers were settled, some flipping through magazines, others dozing off, heads propped on hands. For a moment, I almost believed today's flight would truly pass without incident. But just as that thought crossed my mind, reality decided to prove me wrong. The noise started somewhere around row 23. I heard irritated voices, then a sharp thud, like someone slamming down hard on an armrest. I lifted my head and headed over. In 23D sat a man. About 50 years old. His face was flushed, his eyes slightly glazed over. Even through the plane's conditioned air, the sharp smell of alcohol radiated off him. He was grumbling about everything. The seat was uncomfortable, it was too cold, the food was disgusting, the guy next to him was breathing too loudly. When I approached, he waved a hand dismissively. Where's the real service around here? I paid good money for this ticket. And this? This is a joke. I tightened my smile, the one polished through years of training. Sir, I understand you're upset. Let me help you get more comfortable. He scoffed but seemed to calm down a little. I returned to my station, silently praying that would be the end of it. But 5 minutes later, it started all over again. A loud voice filling the cabin. I demand a new seat. It's stuffy. I can't breathe. He was banging on the armrest, kicking the seat in front of him. Passengers turned around, some with annoyance, some with concern. A child nearby started to cry. I moved toward him again. "Sir, please remain calm. We can offer you some water." He cut me off, half rising from his seat. "Are you kidding me? You think a glass of water is going to fix this?" He spat the words out with pure contempt, like I was beneath him. And in that moment, something inside me tightened. Not fear. Not anger. Just exhaustion. Bone-deep, soul-crushing exhaustion from having to smile over and over again for people who treated you like you were invisible. And then, he appeared. I didn't even see where he came from. Just another passenger. Tall, around 40. Simple blue hoodie, worn jeans. But a quiet confidence in every step. He approached the troublemaker, placed a hand on his shoulder. Firm, not rough, like a captain dropping anchor. Leaning down, he spoke something softly. I didn't hear the words. No one around us did. But the effect was immediate. The drunk man slumped back into his seat, muttered something under his breath, and stared at the floor like a scolded child. Silence returned to the cabin. I stood there in shock. Not because the conflict was over, but because of how it ended. No shouting. No threats. Just a single simple movement. A quiet word. I lifted my eyes and met his gaze. And the world froze. Everything shrank down to that narrow aisle, the hum of the engines filling my ears, and the faint scent of his cologne, light, fresh, with hints of forest green. His eyes were different. Not cold. Not judging. Just present. As if he really saw me. Not the uniform. Not the mask. Me. Our eyes met for a single second, and it was enough. Something inside my chest clicked, like a rusty old lock finally giving way. He nodded, a slight, almost invisible nod, and calmly walked back to his seat. 14A. I memorized the number without even trying. My whole body trembled from the rush of feelings. I pretended to check seatbelts in the nearby rows, when in reality, I was just trying to catch my breath. What just happened? Who was he? Why did his presence make the whole world feel brighter? The flight continued. Passengers slowly relaxed, returning to their devices and books. But I couldn't find my rhythm again. My entire focus pulled toward 14A. It didn't matter what he was doing. All that mattered was that he was there. I knew it was foolish. That one look meant nothing. That I was a grown woman with a husband at home, and a pile of problems waiting for me. But my heart whispered something else entirely. And for the first time in a long, long time, I allowed myself to dream. As the plane began its descent, I stood in the aisle, mechanically going through my usual duties. Fasten your seatbelts. Raise your seatbacks. Stow your tray tables. My hands moved on their own while my thoughts, they were somewhere else entirely. Row 14A. I kept sneaking glances over there again and again. He sat calmly, unhurried. A look of complete peace on his face, like someone who had long since made peace with himself and the world around him. I memorized every small gesture, every turn of his head, trying to imprint it all deep into my mind, like someone who knows. This might be the last time. The landing gear lowered with its familiar groan. The plane touched down with a trembling jolt, and the passengers applauded, some half-heartedly, some sincerely. I didn't clap. I stood there like standing knee-deep in water, slowly sinking back into reality. When the plane finally came to a full stop at the terminal, people began rising from their seats, reaching for their bags, creating that usual buzzing chaos. I positioned myself at the exit, stretching on the standard welcoming smile. But inside, there was nothing standard at all. He was walking among the passengers, a small bag slung over his shoulder. When he reached me, he paused just for a fraction of a second, and he said, "Thank you for the flight." I nodded. "And thank you for your help," I replied, my voice a little warmer than protocol allowed. He smiled faintly, just a tug at the corner of his lips. "I can't stand it when scumbags mistreat beautiful women." The world froze. Those words pierced straight through me. There was no flirting. No sleaze. Just fact. Just honesty. He held my gaze for a heartbeat longer. And then he walked on, blended into the stream of passengers heading out, and disappeared. I stood there, clutching the edge of the doorframe just to keep myself from swaying. When the last passenger had left, I slowly made my way back into the cabin. Silence pressed against my ears. I wandered up the aisle absent-mindedly collecting forgotten items, newspapers, plastic cups, stray headphones. but my heart was beating to a completely different rhythm. I sat down in an empty row by the window, stared out at the evening tarmac, at the headlights flickering in the distance, and asked myself, will I ever see him again? Or was that it? That night, I didn't sleep. In a cheap airport hotel room, with curtains that smelled faintly of synthetic air freshener, I lay staring up at the ceiling, replaying every detail, how he approached, how he looked at me, the scent of his light, fresh cologne, the sound of his voice, how he left. I knew how ridiculous it looked. 36 years old, a woman just trying to get by. And still, I dreamed. I imagined him suddenly showing up on another one of my flights, coming over, saying something more, maybe starting something new. And that night, thousands of feet and miles away from home, I allowed myself a tiny luxury, to believe, even for a moment, that fate might still have something good left for me. A week passed. Just a regular week filled with routine flights, endless trips up and down the aisle, polite smiles, and empty conversations. A week where I scanned every man boarding the plane, hoping to see him. And every time I went home with an aching emptiness inside my chest. That morning I was scheduled for a flight from Charlotte to Chicago. A regular route. Regular passengers. I stood by the boarding gate, adjusting my uniform, trying to shake off the sleepiness after another short, restless night. People boarded, carrying the familiar smells of coffee, perfume, and fatigue. I nodded politely at each one. And then I saw him. He walked with that same confident, unhurried stride as if everything around him moved in slow motion. He wore the same simple navy hoodie and jeans. His hair was a little tousled from the breeze. A leather shoulder bag swung casually at his side. When he caught sight of me, a small smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. As he approached, he said softly, "Are we battling troublemakers on board today?" I froze for a split second, then smiled back, genuinely warmly. "Hopefully we'll get through the day without them." He nodded, that slight, almost shy half-smile still on his lips, and something inside me clicked again. Then he continued to his seat. The whole flight, I stole glances at him from the corner of my eye. He sat there quietly, reading a book with a black cover, occasionally gazing out the window. He never looked for my gaze. Never gave any sign. Cold. Calm. Like an iceberg adrift in the ocean. I tried to look busy, offering drinks, checking seatbelts, answering call buttons. But my heart kept pounding against my throat. In every small gesture, I searched for a sign. Maybe he feels something too? Maybe I'm not the only one? The descent began. The plane jolted slightly, making some passengers clutch their armrests while others calmly kept reading. I stood in the aisle, pretending to focus on safety instructions. In truth, I was just waiting. Waiting for him to come closer. Waiting for him to say something. Waiting for even the smallest signal. The plane rolled to a stop at the terminal. Passengers unfastened their belts, opened overhead bins, pulled down their suitcases with a chorus of thuds and murmured chatter. I stood at the exit. And there he was. He walked toward me. For a fleeting second, our eyes met. A smile, just barely there. A small nod. And then he moved on, merging into the tide of people flowing out of the cabin. Gone. Again. I stood there, gripping the edge of the doorframe, forcing my professional smile to stay in place. But inside, something crumbled. When the last passenger left, I took a deep breath. No room for emotions now. There was work to be done. I slowly moved up the aisle, picking up forgotten peanut wrappers, plastic cups, scattered napkins. Mechanical. Mindless. When I reached his row, I stopped. Almost automatically, I leaned down to straighten a seatbelt. And that's when I saw it. There, tucked neatly under the belt, was a folded white note. Perfectly square. Perfectly placed. As if someone had left it just for me. I couldn't breathe. The world around me seemed to vanish. My fingers, trembling so badly they barely worked, reached out and picked it up. I nearly dropped it back onto the seat. I unfolded it carefully. And read the first line, "If you don't mind, I'd love to invite you for a coffee." And right then, everything inside me exploded. I held the note in my hands like it was the most precious thing I'd ever been given. My fingers were trembling. I was afraid to blink, afraid to believe. He had actually left it for me. "If you don't mind, I'd love to invite you for coffee this Friday at 6 p.m. at Shoreline Cafe on South Pine. I promise. No battles with troublemakers this time. Just good coffee and good conversation. If you can't make it, feel free to text me at phone number. Would love to see you. Jackson." I read those lines over and over again, trying to memorize them by heart. As if missing even a single word would make it all slip away. For a few minutes, the entire world around me disappeared. No plane. No job. No exhaustion, no pain, no disappointment. There was only him. And me. And this fragile thread tying us together through that little piece of paper. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of hope. And yet, along with that hope came fear. Sharp. Cold. I have a husband. The thought hit me like a slap across the face. Mark. Home. Obligations. The wedding band still sitting on my finger, a ring I had long since stopped noticing. I exhaled shakily, leaning against the back of a seat in row 15. No matter how much I dreamt of freedom, reality had a cruel way of reminding me where I stood. I was married. Legally still married. Yes, our relationship was dead. Yes, we were strangers sharing the same space. But that didn't change the fact. I wasn't free. I pressed my forehead against the note, my whole body trembling. What am I supposed to do? What right do I even have to do anything? If I went to meet him, would that be betrayal? Or would it be the first step toward saving myself? I closed my eyes. Images flooded my mind. Mark, yelling, accusing me of things I never did. Nights spent lying back to back in the same bed. The hollow silence of a house that had once been a home. I remembered the aching realization that the only place I ever felt truly alive anymore was in the sky, far above the ground, far away from him. And yet, fear gripped me tight. What if he finds out? What if I destroy everything for good? What if Jackson changes his mind? What if this was all a mistake? I looked back down at the note. The neat handwriting. The warm tone. No pressure. No demands. Just an invitation. There was something so real in it. Something I hadn't felt in a very, very long time. I ran my fingertips along the edge of the paper. Thin. Fragile. Like the chance of a lifetime. I knew there would be consequences. Pain. Change. The kind of upheaval I had been too scared to face for years. But deep down I also knew. If I turned away now, if I hid behind my fear one more time, I would stay stuck exactly where I had been. In emptiness. In a cage. That evening back in my hotel room, I sat for a long time by the window, staring out at the city lights. The note lay in front of me on the table, almost accusing in its silence. In my phone, a number I hadn't dared to dial. In my mind, a whirlwind of thoughts. In my heart, a storm of fear and hope. Friday. 6 p.m. Shoreline Cafe. I had a choice. Something rare in my life lately. And I realized whatever choice I made, there would be no going back. I sat in the silence for a long, long time. Then I stood up, walked over to the mirror. I looked into my own eyes. And for the first time in a very long while, I saw someone alive looking back. Not a victim. Not a prisoner of circumstance. A woman. I didn't know how this story would end. But I knew this much. I had to take that step. For myself. Tomorrow would be Friday. And everything would change. I woke up early. The hotel room was filled with the heavy, dry air of the air conditioner humming all night. A rectangle of light from the window cut a slice of bright blue August sky into the room. Today was Friday. The day that could change everything. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling my heart pounding in my throat. A short flight home this morning, a conversation with Mark, and tonight, the meeting. If I didn't run away from fear first. I got ready quickly. I threw on a light denim jacket over my uniform, not for warmth but out of habit. The outside air was already thick and sticky with early morning humidity. The final flight home passed in a fog. I went through the motions, barely hearing the passengers' voices or the pilot's announcements. Only my thoughts buzzed in my mind. When the plane landed, I grabbed my bag silently and left the airport. I ordered a cab, clutched the strap of my bag so tightly my knuckles turned white. The ride home was short, but it felt like forever. I entered the apartment. Silence slammed into me. The stale, forgotten smell of the place hit like an old photograph left in a dusty box. I shrugged off my jacket and dropped my bag by the wall, and froze for a moment. Mark was sitting at the kitchen table, with a cup of coffee in his hand. He looked up at me. No anger. No accusations. Just exhaustion. "We need to talk," he said. I nodded and sat down across from him. We sat in silence for several long seconds. I could hear the drip of water from the kitchen faucet. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding. "I don't want to keep doing this," he finally said, exhaling. "We're not living. We're just dragging this out." "I know," I whispered. He slid a folder toward me. Divorce papers. Already signed on his side. No screaming. No drama. Just the end. I picked up the pen and signed my name. With a steady hand. No shaking. When Mark went to pack his things, I stayed at the kitchen table, sitting in the silence. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I didn't feel pain. I felt freedom. Time moved strangely. I didn't know what to do with myself. I sorted through some things in the hallway, wiped down a few dusty shelves, threw a few shirts into the wash just to keep my hands busy. The whole time my thoughts circled around one thing. Today, 6 p.m. at the cafe. What if he doesn't show? What if this was all a mistake? What if I ruined everything for nothing? The clock read 4 p.m. I walked into the bedroom, opened the closet, and for the first time in a long, long time allowed myself to ask, what do I want to wear for me? I chose a simple cream-colored dress. Simple. Clean. Something that made me feel like myself. I didn't try to look younger, flashier, different. I just wanted to be me. Light makeup. Hair loose. Low-heeled shoes. A small shoulder bag. When I looked in the mirror for the first time in years, I saw someone alive staring back. Not a woman trapped in a cage. Not a shadow of herself. A real person. At 5:20 p.m., I left the house. The air outside was thick and hot. The pavement radiated warmth beneath my feet. Traffic crawled by in the typical Friday snarl. People rushed everywhere. I caught a cab and held onto my bag strap like it could anchor me through the storm. As we neared the cafe, my heart started to pound faster. And a thought floated through my mind. Even if he doesn't come, you made the right choice. You chose yourself. And somehow it made everything a little easier. Not much, but enough to stop me from turning around and running. The Shoreline Cafe sat on the corner. Small, warm, glowing with soft light inside. The smell of coffee drifted out onto the street. I stood at the door for a moment, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. And there he was. Jackson was sitting by the window, wearing a dark shirt, a cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up and smiled. That smile, a little shy, completely real. I walked toward him. He stood up, paused for just a second, not pushing, just waiting. I took a step toward him. He leaned in slightly and whispered, "May I?" I nodded. He took my hand. Warm, steady, no rush. We sat down, ordered coffee, and started to talk. Not about big things. Not about the future. Just simple things. Music we loved. Movies that moved us. Dreams we were too afraid to speak out loud. I laughed. I listened. I felt something inside me wake up again, something I thought I'd lost. When we finally stepped outside, night had fallen. The evening air was thick and sweet like warm syrup. He suggested a walk. I agreed. We strolled slowly. No rush. Holding hands. And I thought, how little it takes to be happy. Just being next to someone who understands you without words. Sometimes all it takes is one step. And the courage to let yourself truly live.